Warning: the following audiobook is not suitable for all audiences. We may go into great detail with every case that we cover and do our best to bring viewers even deeper into the stories by utilizing disturbing audio and sound effects. Trigger warnings from the stories we cover may include violence, rape, murder, and offenses against children. This audiobook is not for everyone. You have been warned.
You are listening. Charles Ponzi, original Ponzi scheme investment scam. Written by Moose and Schichter. Voiced by Olivia Benson, Harry Bosch, and Dr. Temperance Brennan. Audio mixing by PeyeC Radio.
Imagine being born into a family that once had it all. Wealth, status, respect. Now, imagine watching it all slip away, leaving you with nothing but dreams of what could have been. This was the world of young Carlo Ponzi, and it set him on a path that would one day shock the world. What if I told you a penniless Italian immigrant would scam millions out of people across the globe? Stick around to see how Charles Ponzi's journey began. In 1882, in the quiet town of Lugo, Italy, Carlo Pietro Giovanni Guglielmo Tebaldo Ponzi came into the world. Yeah, that's a mouthful. Don't worry. We'll just call him Carlo for now. His family had once been prominent, well-off folks in their community. But by the time Carlo was a kid, their fortunes had crumbled. Late 19th century Italy wasn't exactly a land of opportunity for everyone. Economic hardship hit hard, and waves of people were packing up for America, hoping for a fresh start. For young Carlo, this financial decline wasn't just a backdrop, it was personal. He saw his parents scramble to keep up appearances, drowning in debts they couldn't pay. That kind of thing sticks with you, right? It planted a seed in him, a hunger for wealth, not just to survive, but to reclaim the respect and power his family once had. He swore he'd never be poor again. By 1903, at 21 years old, Carlo had had enough of scraping by in Italy. With just $2.50 in his pocket, seriously, that's it, he boarded the SS Vancouver, bound for Boston. It's the classic immigrant story. Big dreams, little cash, and a whole lot of hope. But here's the twist. We know where this story ends, and it's not all sunshine and roses. When he stepped off that ship in Boston, Carlo became Charles Ponzi, ready to chase the American dream. But America didn't exactly roll out the red carpet. He barely spoke English, had no connections, and the $2.50. Well, that wasn't gonna last long. Life in Boston was rough. Ponzi bounced from one menial job to the next, washing dishes in grimy restaurants, waiting tables for pennies, even painting signs when he could. He later said, "I was determined to make good, to become somebody, to show the world that I was not just another poor immigrant." Noble words, sure, but reality wasn't so kind. Every day was a grind. He'd finish a shift, washing dishes only, to sleep on the streets or in some rundown boarding house, barely scraping together enough for a meal. He tried being a grocer's assistant too, but his broken English and the prejudice he faced, "Oh, you're just another Italian," kept him stuck. Paychecks were small, savings were a pipe dream, and resentment started to bubble up inside him. Ever wonder what pushes a guy to the edge? For Ponzi, it was this relentless struggle, the feeling of being trapped, the system rigged against him. He started writing letters back home, spinning tales of success. But the truth, he was barely hanging on. This wasn't just about money anymore. Ponzi craved recognition, the kind of respect his family lost. And in his mind, wealth was the shortcut to get there. Rules be damned. You can almost see it, right? Each rejection, each dead-end job, was like fuel on a fire, stoking this dangerous mix of ambition and desperation. He started to see the world differently, not as a land of opportunity, but as a game to be won. The stage was set. The kid who arrived with $2.50 and $1 million worth of dreams was turning into someone else. Someone who'd bend the rules. And soon break them entirely. What's the takeaway from Ponzi's early years? Maybe it's this. Our beginnings shape us more than we think. Financial struggles can light a fire under you, sure, but without something, call it ethics, call it a moral compass, that fire can burn out of control. Ponzi's story is a warning about the fragility of greed and how desperation can twist even the brightest dreams into something dark. But how far would he go? And what would it cost? His struggles were just the beginning. In our next chapter, we'll dive into Ponzi's first taste of crime and how it set the stage for his infamous scheme. So, what do you think drove Ponzi toward fraud? Was it desperation, ambition, or something else entirely? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'm dying to hear what you think. If you enjoyed this dive into the making of a fraudster, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Next time, we'll uncover Ponzi's first crimes and how they foreshadowed one of the biggest scams in history. See you then! What if your first big break turned out to be your first big mistake? That's exactly what happened to Charles Ponzi when he stepped into the world of banking and crime. Imagine losing everything before you've even begun. Ponzi's first crimes were just the start. Stay tuned to see how they shaped his future. Last time, we saw Ponzi's humble beginnings in Italy and his move to America, where he struggled to make ends meet. Now, let's dive into his first crimes and see how they set the stage for his infamous scheme. It's 1907, and Charles Ponzi's tired of scraping by in Boston. So, he heads north to Montreal, Canada, chasing a fresh start. He lands a job at Banco Zarossi, a bank serving Italian immigrants like himself. At first glance, it's a golden ticket, a chance to dip his toes into finance and maybe climb out of the hole his family's lost fortune left him in. But here's the twist. Banco Zarossi isn't your typical bank. It's promising crazy high interest rates to draw in deposits, a trick that sounds suspiciously like what Ponzi would later master. Ironic, right? For a young, ambitious guy like Ponzi, this must have felt like hitting the jackpot. He's probably thinking, okay, I'm learning the game now. But the bank's built on a house of cards. Those high returns are unsustainable. It's only a matter of time before the whole thing collapses. Ponzi starts as a clerk, but he's not just pushing papers. He's watching, soaking it all in. Banco Zarossi's strategy, luring depositors with big promises, plants a seed in his mind. He's getting a front-row seat to a financial tightrope act. For a guy desperate to reclaim his family's status, this gig feels like a stepping stone. But success built on shaky ground? Well, it rarely lasts. By 1908, Banco Zarossi's wobbling hard. The bank can't keep up with its promises and panic sets in. Deposits dry up and the whole operation's about to tank. Ponzi may be desperate to keep it afloat, or just to save his own job. makes a move that changes everything. He forges a check. Picture it like slapping a band-aid on a sinking ship. Sure, it might buy you a minute, but you're still going under. He gets caught, of course. The bank collapses, and Ponzi's forgery lands him in hot water. In 1908, he's sentenced to 3 years in prison. 3 years! Man, that's a brutal wake-up call. You'd think it'd straighten him out, but nah, this is just the warm-up. He serves his time, gets out, and what does he do? Goes right back to trouble. This time, he tries smuggling Italian immigrants into the US. Another get-rich-quick idea that flops. Caught again, he's slapped with 2 more years behind bars. It's like watching a train wreck in slow motion. One bad call after another, each digging him deeper. So, what can we pull from this mess? Ponzi's early stumbles scream a warning. Overambition can blind you, and shortcuts can sink you. That forged check wasn't just a mistake. It was a pattern starting to form. Lesson 1. Desperation's a lousy advisor. Lesson 2. Early choices stick with you. Ponzi's first crimes didn't just cost him time, they shaped his whole playbook. And lesson 3. Bending the rules might feel clever in the moment, but the bill always comes due. It's like a snowball rolling downhill. Small at first, but unstoppable once it picks up speed. Ponzi's story shows that the path to success isn't about quick fixes. It's about playing the long game smart. Have you ever been tempted to take a shortcut, thinking no one would notice? Ponzi did, and it cost him dearly. What do you think? Can a mistake like that ever be left behind, or does it always catch up? Here's the wild part. Prison didn't break Ponzi, it sharpened him. He later bragged, "I went to prison a criminal and came out a financier." Seriously, huh? It's like he treated jail as fraud 101, picking up tricks he'd later turn into his $1 million scam. The irony's thick. His punishment became his training ground. But this isn't the end of Ponzi's story. It's just the setup. Next, we'll see how he takes these hard-earned lessons back to the US and builds the scheme that'll make his name infamous. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Let's wrap this up. Ponzi's time at Banco Zarossi, the bank's collapse, that forged check, and those prison stints. They're not just footnotes. They're the foundation of everything that comes next. The big takeaway? Overambition can spark brilliance, but paired with desperation, it's a recipe for disaster. So, what lessons can we learn from Ponzi's early failures? Drop your thoughts below. I'm dying to hear what you think. If you're hooked on Ponzi's wild ride, hit that like button, subscribe, and smack that bell. Next time, we'll dive into how he turned prison smarts into a multi-million-dollar con. See you then. What if I told you that one of the biggest scams in history kicked off with something as innocent as a postage coupon? Yeah, a tiny slip of paper you'd trade for stamps. Sounds harmless, right? Well, stick around because Charles Ponzi turned that little coupon into an empire of lies. A scheme so wild, it still echoes through financial history. This is the story of Ponzi's return to America after prison, fueled by shame and ambition, and how he launched the Securities Exchange Company in January 1920 using international reply coupons. It's a tale dripping with intrigue and the creeping shadow of doom, showing how the illusion of opportunity can birth deception on a massive scale. Previously, we watched Ponzi's early crimes, forgery and smuggling, land him behind bars in Canada. You'd think prison would have crushed him, but nah, it was more like a twisted boot camp. It sharpened his hustle and stoked his hunger for a comeback. Now, let's dive into how he set the stage for his grand con, driven by a need to erase his past and prove he was more than a broke immigrant. Picture this. It's 1917, and Charles Ponzi steps off a train in Boston. He's not the same guy who rolled into America years back with $2, 50 and big dreams. Prison's left its mark. He's tougher, cagier, and still flat broke. But now he's got something brewing. Shame's eating at him. He's obsessed with reclaiming his family's lost honor. In his head, that means one thing: money, and lots of it. Problem is, he's got no cash, no network, and a rap sheet that screams trouble. So, how's a guy like that climb out of the gutter? Cue the international reply coupon. So, what's this coupon thing? An international reply coupon, IRC, is a voucher you buy in one country and swap for postage stamps in another. Simple. Boring even. But Ponzi? He saw gold. After World War I, currencies were a mess. Some countries sold these coupons dirt cheap compared to the stamp value in the US. His light bulb moment: buy low overseas, redeem high here, pocket the difference. Classic arbitrage, right? On paper, it's legit. But here's the rub. The profits were peanuts, and the logistics were a nightmare. Shipping costs, exchange rates, the sheer volume needed to make it big. It didn't add up. Most people would have walked away, but not Ponzi. He didn't care about making it work for real. He saw the coupon as a shiny prop for a much bigger game. A story to sell. Fast forward to January 1920. Ponzi sets up shop with the Securities Exchange Company. His pitch is straight up bananas. Invest with him, and he'll double your money in 90 days. Later, he dials it up. 50% returns in just 45 days. How? Those magical IRCs, of course. Buy cheap, redeem high, everyone wins. He keeps it vague. Investors don't need the nitty-gritty. They just need to believe. And holy cow, did they believe? Word spreads like wildfire. People line up, cash in hand, begging to get in. Thousands pour in, then hundreds of thousands. It's a feeding frenzy. But here's the dirty little secret. Ponzi's barely buying any coupons. The returns? They're not from arbitrage. They're from new investors' money paying off the old ones. Yep, it's a Ponzi scheme, plain and simple. A house of cards built on charm and lies. Running a scam this size isn't a walk in the park. Ponzi's juggling hot potatoes, paying early investors to keep the dream alive, all while reeling in fresh cash. It's a treadmill cranked to max speed. And the heat's building. Reporters sniff around, regulators raise eyebrows, and some sharp investors start asking, where's the proof? Ponzi's got the gift of gab, flashing that $1 million smile, brushing them off. He even drops a line, I'm not a crook, I'm just ahead of my time. Bold move for a guy sweating bullets, but the math's a ticking bomb. The scheme's ballooning, and he needs more money just to stay afloat. Deep down, he knows it's a runaway train heading for a cliff. So, what's the takeaway here? Let's break it down. Too good to be true. Run. Ponzi's coupon hook was clever, but the insane return screamed scam. If it sounds like a fairy tale, it probably is. Desperation clouds judgment. Ponzi was so fixated on his redemption arc that he ignored the gaping holes in his plan. Ambition's great until it blinds you. Lies have an expiration date. You can snow people for a bit, but reality always crashes the party. It's like stacking cards in a storm. Looks cool till the wind blows. Ever wonder how a tiny idea can snowball into chaos? Ponzi spun a coupon into a con that duped thousands. If you stumbled on a loophole like that, would you cash in or walk away? Hit the comments. I want to know. Here's the wild part. Ponzi actually thought he could pull it off. He figured if he kept the plate spinning long enough, he'd legitimize it somehow. But that's the trap. Once you start lying, it's a one-way ticket. The deeper he dug, the harder it got to climb out. The clock's ticking. Next time we'll unpack how he kept this beast alive and how it all came crashing down. Spoiler: the collapse is as nuts as the setup. Imagine someone strolling up to you on the street and saying, "Hand over your money, and in just 45 days I'll give you 50% more. Stick around for 90 days and I'll double it." Sounds like a scam, doesn't it? Too good to be true, right? Well, in 1920, Charles Ponzi didn't just pitch this wild idea. He made thousands of people believe it. They didn't just nod along. They lined up, cash in hand, practically begging to join the party. At its peak, Ponzi was raking in $250,000 a day, millions in today's dollars. How did he pull it off? Stay with me as we unravel the mechanics of his deception and the irresistible lure of easy money that hooked an entire city. Last time, we watched Ponzi launch his securities exchange company, spinning a fancy tale about international reply coupons, IRCs, that'd turn investors into millionaires. But those coupons? Pure fiction, a shiny distraction. Now let's dig into the real story, how his scheme actually worked, and why so many people handed over their life savings for a promise that was, frankly, bonkers. It's 1920. America's riding high on post-war optimism. People are itching for a chance to strike it rich. Enter Charles Ponzi, a smooth-talking guy with a tiny office in Boston and a pitch that's pure dynamite. He promises 50% returns in 45 days or 100% in 90 days. How's he doing it? Something about buying IRCs, little postal vouchers, cheap overseas, and cashing them in for profit here. It's a complicated-sounding story, just legit enough to feel, real but simple enough to sell to the average Joe. Here's the catch. Ponzi's not really buying those coupons, at least not enough to matter. The real magic? He's using money from new investors to pay off the old ones. Yup, it's the textbook Ponzi scheme, named after the guy himself. It's a fragile illusion, a house of cards ready to collapse at the first gust of doubt. So, how did this crazy scheme take off? Let's break it down, step by step. The pitch. Ponzi dangles those jaw-dropping returns. 50% in 45 days, 100% in 90. He says it's all thanks to IRC arbitrage, buying low, selling high across borders. Investors don't need to get the nitty-gritty. They just need to trust the guy with the charming grin. Early investors, the first folks, take the plunge and fork over their cash. Ponzi skims some for himself. Gotta pay the bills, right? But he also shells out those promised returns to the early birds. Why? Proof of concept. When they walk away with fat wallets, their friends notice. Word spreads like wildfire. Word spreads. Those payouts light a spark. Suddenly, Ponzi's the talk of Boston. Newspapers dub him a financial wizard. People are queuing up outside his office, waving stacks of cash. At his peak, he's hauling in $250,000 a day, over $3 million in today's terms. Per day. Let that sink in. Scaling up. To keep the machine humming, Ponzi needs fresh cash. Lots of it. He opens more offices, hires agents, even offers commissions to folks who rope in new suckers. It's like a pyramid scheme with extra steps. And everyone's getting a piece as long as the money keeps pouring in. Here's where it gets messy. Ponzi's dishing out huge returns, but he's not making any real profits. Every dollar in is either going out to investors or straight into his pocket. It's a ticking time bomb, and he knows it. By July 1920, he's got over 20,000 investors and owes millions in promised payouts. Problem is, he's only got a sliver of that in actual funds. If even a handful of people demand their money at once, it's game over. Ponzi's sweating, but he plays it cool, throwing extravagant parties, snapping up mansions, telling reporters, "I'm not worried, the money's there." Spoiler alert, it wasn't. What can we take from this wild ride? Let's boil it down to some cold, hard truths. If it's too good to be true, it is. Doubling your money in 90 days? Come on! No legit investment pulls that off without insane risk. If it sounds like a fairy tale, it's probably a lie. Hype's a warning sign. Ponzi's scheme fed off buzz, word of mouth, glowing headlines, social proof. But hype isn't evidence. Always dig past the noise. Know the game plan. His investors didn't ask the big questions. How's this actually working? Where's the proof? If you can't explain the business model, keep your wallet shut. Greed clouds judgment. People wanted to believe so badly they ignored the red flags. It's human, sure, but it's also a fast track to getting burned. Be honest, have you ever fallen for a get-rich-quick pitch? Maybe not Ponzi-level crazy, but something that dangled big rewards for zero effort. I bet we've all been there. Ponzi's story is a neon sign flashing danger. What red flags do you watch for now? Drop your thoughts below. I'm curious. Here's what still fries my brain. Ponzi wasn't hiding in the shadows. He was front and center, flaunting his success like a rock star. And people lapped it up. Why? He tapped into that primal itch for easy money. He made it look so effortless, and that's the con's genius. One investor later admitted it was like magic. I didn't get it, but I didn't care. That's deception at its finest. It doesn't have to add up. It just has to feel good. The clock's ticking louder now. Next time, we'll hit the height of Ponzi's fame and watch the first threads of his empire unravel. Trust me, the fall's as wild as the rise. Imagine this. You're rolling in cash, buying mansions, cruising in luxury cars, and tossing money around like it's nothing. Sounds like a dream, right? Well, for Charles Ponzi in the summer of 1920, it was reality. Except it was all a mirage. He was living like royalty, but the walls were closing in fast. The Boston Post was digging. Investigators were lurking, and his empire of lies was teetering on the edge. How does a guy go from hero to zero in a heartbeat? Stick around, because we're about to watch it all come crashing down. Last time, we unpacked the nuts and bolts of Ponzi's scheme, promising wild returns, paying early investors with fresh cash, and holding it all together with charisma and deception. Now we're diving into the moment it started to wobble, and then collapsed under its own weight. By mid-1920, Charles Ponzi was Boston's golden boy. He'd gone from a broke nobody to a millionaire in mere months. Picture this: a massive Lexington mansion with servants scurrying around, a garage stuffed with shiny cars, and Ponzi himself strutting around in sharp suits. He was donating to charities, rubbing elbows with big shots, and even flirting with a political career. To the world, he'd cracked the code to instant wealth. But behind the curtain, total chaos. Ponzi was drowning in promises, millions in payouts he couldn't cover. The only way to keep the scam alive was to suck in more money, and fast. He later admitted, "I was like a man on a tightrope, always one step from falling. The pressure was insane, and the cracks were showing." At his peak, Ponzi was pulling in $250,000 a day. That's over $3 million in today's money. His office was a zoo, with crowds lining up around the block, desperate to hand over their cash. People were mortgaging homes, cashing out life savings, even yanking kids' college funds to get in on the action. It was pure madness. The press ate it up. Headlines blared, "Ponzi's magic touch," and "the man who doubles money." He was a rock star, and every story dragged in more suckers. But here's the deal with bubbles. They don't just pop, they explode. Then came the Boston Post, a gritty little paper with a knack for trouble. In July 1920, they started poking holes in Ponzi's fairy tale. "How's he making this money?" they asked. "Where's the proof?" They dug up his past, prison, time in Canada for forgery and smuggling, and splashed it across the front page. Suddenly, the genius had a criminal record. Ponzi tried to play it cool, calling it a smear job and even suing the paper for libel. But the seed of doubt was planted. Investors got twitchy, and a few started pulling out. He paid them off to save face, but it was like bailing out a sinking ship with a teaspoon. The tide was turning. The real gut punch came from Clarence Barron, a financial whiz who'd later launch Barron's magazine. He did the math and dropped a bombshell. Ponzi claimed he was trading millions of international reply coupons, IRCs, to make his profits. Problem was, there were only about 27,000 IRCs in existence worldwide. The whole story was a giant lie. The Boston Post ran with it, and that was it. Game over. Panic hit like a freight train. Investors stormed his office, demanding their money. But there was nothing left. Ponzi was flat broke. He'd been shuffling cash around, robbing Peter to pay Paul, and now Peter was pissed. On August 10th, 1920, the authorities froze his accounts, and the whole scheme crumbled like a sandcastle in a storm. So, what's the takeaway from this train wreck? Let's break it down. Success built on lies is doomed. Ponzi's empire looked rock solid until it wasn't. No amount of swagger can outrun the truth. Scrutiny saves you. The Boston Post's nosiness stopped the bleeding for a lot of folks. Always dig into deals that sound too sweet. Greed blinds you. Investors ignored the warning signs because they wanted the fantasy. Keep your eyes open, especially when it's all on the line. It's like stacking a skyscraper on quicksand. Impressive, until it sinks. Ever watched someone's life fall apart in real time? Ponzi's collapse was a front-row seat to chaos. So, what do you think flipped the switch? Was it the Boston Post's exposé, Barron's number crunching, or something else? Hit me with your take in the comments. I'm dying to hear it. Here's the crazy part. Ponzi saw it coming. He later said, "I always knew it would end this way, but I couldn't stop." It's like he was hooked on the rush, the lies, the tension, the high-wire act. He'd spun a web so tight there was no escaping it. The law's tightening the noose, and Ponzi's about to pay the piper. Next time, we'll hit his arrest, the trial, and the mess he left behind. Spoiler, it's ugly. Ever heard someone mutter, "It's a Ponzi scheme," and wondered where that phrase came from? Well, meet Charles Ponzi, the guy who turned a get-rich-quick hustle into a name synonymous with financial fraud. Picture this. One day, he's raking in millions. The next, he's in handcuffs, facing 86 counts of mail fraud. From a 5-year prison stint to deportation and a lonely death, Ponzi's story is a wild ride that ends in a cautionary tale we can't ignore. How did a small-time dreamer become the poster child for scams? And why does his legacy still haunt us today? Stick around as we unravel his arrest, legal battles, and the enduring lessons of his downfall. Last time, we saw Ponzi's empire of promises crumble. His scheme, paying old investors with new investors' cash, got exposed, sparking chaos. Investors stormed his office, the press tore him apart, and the law was hot on his heels. Now, let's dive into what happened next. The arrest, the courtroom drama, and the fallout that cemented his name in infamy. It's August 1920, and Boston's buzzing with outrage. The Boston Post has just dropped a bombshell exposé, and financial. Expert Clarence Barron crunched the numbers. Ponzi's operation is a sham. He's promised insane 50% returns in 45 days through international postal coupons. Except he's not buying nearly enough coupons to make it work. The truth? He's got no real profits, just a growing pile of debt. Investors are furious, banging on his door, but the cash is gone. Ponzi's flat broke. On August 12, 1920, federal agents storm in and slap the cuffs on him. He's hit with 86 counts of mail fraud. Why mail fraud? Because he used the US Postal Service to send out his fake investment certificates. A federal no-no. At first, he pleads not guilty, spinning tales to save his skin. But his own records betray him. Millions owed, nothing to show for it. Eventually, he caves, pleading guilty to one count, banking on leniency. Spoiler, it doesn't work. November 1920 rolls around, and Ponzi's in court. The judge isn't buying his charm. He's sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. He serves 3.5, gets out early for good behavior, and you'd think he'd lay low, right? Nope. Massachusetts has other plans. They nail him with state charges for larceny. Ponzi, ever the showman, decides to play lawyer and represent himself. In 1922, he's convicted again, 7 to 9 more years. But wait, there's a twist. While out on appeal, Ponzi bolts. He hightails it to Florida, tries to run a shady real estate hustle, because apparently he's learned zilch, and gets nabbed again. Back to prison he goes. By 1934, he's served his time, but America's had enough. Since he's an Italian immigrant, they deport him back to Italy. Ponzi's golden days are long gone. In Italy, he drifts to Brazil, scraping by as an English teacher. He tries a few more schemes, shocker, but they flop. By 1949, he's broke, sick, and alone, dying in a charity hospital in Rio de Janeiro. His last words? "I guess I'm just a failure." Man, that hits hard. From flaunting millions to penniless in a hospital bed. It's a brutal fall. Here's the kicker. Ponzi didn't just fade away. His name stuck, etched into every scam that follows his blueprint. Think Bernie Madoff, who swindled $65 billion using the same trick. Pay early investors with later ones' money until it all collapses. Every time someone says Ponzi scheme, they're tipping their hat to Charles, whether they know it or not. The wreckage he left, staggering. Thousands of investors, ordinary folks, lost everything. Estimates peg his take at $20 million in 1920, which is over $250 million today. Families ruined, savings vanished, trust shattered. And the echoes? They ripple through every modern fraud, a reminder that human greed doesn't quit. So, what's Ponzi's wild ride teach us? Let's break it down. Ambition without integrity is a time bomb. Ponzi had the smarts and hustle to succeed legit, but he chose lies. It blew up in his face. History loves a repeat. Ponzi schemes keep popping up. Madoff, crypto scams, you name it, because people forget the warning signs. Stay woke, trust your gut. If it sounds too good to be true, like 50% returns in 45 days, it probably is. Ponzi's investors ignored the red flags. Don't be them. It's like chasing a mirage. You're thirsty for riches, but you end up lost in the desert. Why does Ponzi's name stick when other fraudsters fade? Is it the sheer audacity, the scale of the scam, or the universal lesson? What hits you hardest from his story? Greed, trust, or the crash? Drop your thoughts below. I'm dying to hear. Here's the real sting. Ponzi could have been a legit success. He had the charisma, the drive. But he picked the shortcut, built a castle on sand, and watched it crumble. It's a gut punch of a reminder. Cutting corners might feel good for a minute, but the bill always comes due. Ponzi's just one chapter in the saga of financial flops. Next time, we're cracking open another scandal that rocked the world. It's juicy. Don't miss it.